Welcome to I Hate It Here, the podcast for HR and people professionals, making the hardest job in the world just a little bit easier. I'm Hiba Youssef.
We actually put out a lot of content around this when companies were going through restructuring and layoffs. Like, how do you do that thoughtfully? You know, not like even from a change management perspective. And so I think that also tells employees like everything that they need to know about culture is how do we communicate when things are tough, or do we just go silent and let people run with their own stories?
Hiring globally shouldn't require a law degree, a magic 8-ball, and a 4-leaf clover. Oyster HR brings calm to the chaos. So if you need a rockstar developer in Brazil or a marketing wizard in Berlin, Oyster lets you hire full-time or flex talent in 180 plus countries with no entity required. They handle global payroll without any complicated spreadsheets, local contracts and benefits so you don't accidentally break labor laws, and even have compliance guidance to keep you from getting fined into oblivion. Basically, they're the HR sidekick you wish you had. Visit oysterhr.com to get started. Your future international employees and lawyers will thank you. Multi-state compliance is a nightmare, but 650 makes it easy. Get instant questions to employment law questions, generate a compliant multi-state handbook in minutes, and stay ahead of changing laws with automated updates. Visit sixfifty.com to learn more. That's 650.com. Welcome back to another episode of your favorite podcast where HR folks stop being polite and start getting real. Actually, that's like the tagline for the real world. But I thought it was really fitting for today's episode because I have another banger lined up for you. We've spent all season diving into what employees really want, from better feedback to better leaders. And today we're tackling yet another thing employees desperately want: real work cultures. You know, the kind where what's said in the all hands actually matches what's happening day to day. And we're going to dig into what it takes to close that gap between what leaders say and what employees live. And joining me today is the incredible Latesha Byrd. Latesha is the founder and CEO of Perfecta, where she partners with organizations to design people-first cultures, elevate leadership, and build systems that unlock team potential. As an executive coach and speaker, she guides leaders through change with a focus on team alignment, culture clarity, and long-term sustainability. Latesha, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
It's going to be such a good episode. Like we met online, we exchanged texts, and now we're making this happen. And like all my friends, I meet a lot of people online these days. We just bonded.
That's the way to do it now.
We bonded. We like saw something and both of us were like, ooh, hey, we don't think we like that. And then we started talking about it.
Right.
I love that.
We were locked in.
We knew what was going on from like the second we met. This season, I've been asking every guest, just like as a starter question, what's one truth about work that you wish more leaders understood?
I always have to repeat the question when it's good. What's one truth about work you wish more leaders understood?
Yeah.
There's so many. I would say, how much time do we have? But one thing I would say is that we bring so much more than just work to work, you know, like especially in this time of living through a pandemic and the, you know, long-term impacts of that, where many of us are still working remote. Some companies are, you know, implementing their RTO policies and things like that. But I remember like back in 2020, we used to say like, we are not just working from home, we're living at work. And I think we saw a shift in terms of people bringing more of their personal lives, whether that be kids running in the background, cats running across the desk like my cat Nipsey does sometimes, but just there's so much more of ourselves that goes into how we're showing up at work, our performance, how we need to be supported. And so that's really the biggest truth that I want more leaders to understand, that it's so important as a leader to not just focus only on the work, but learn how to support your teams on things that are happening outside of the work, because that is showing up in the work, if that makes sense. So I use work a lot, but I hope that resonates.
No, that does. I mean, I talked about leadership on the last episode, and this is just so true. Like, we are not just these robots that come to work and drop off all our baggage.
Right.
the second I open this computer. Honestly, I think I have more baggage the second I open this computer some days.
Okay.
Some days I'm like, oh God. But I mean,
Yes.
it's just like, it's very true. And I love that. I think more leaders could stand to understand like there's a world outside that all of us are experiencing, and that so defines how we show up every day.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so getting into culture. I'm really excited to do this episode with you. Like, I feel like you have seen so much, you know so much, and people want like real work culture. So how would you define real culture, and how can you tell when it's missing?
A real work culture. I really sat with the term real for a minute as I was thinking about our conversation. And for me, I think the opposite of real is fake, right? So many of us, and what I've seen in this work, are masking. We're hiding parts of our identities. We're hiding our quirks. We're hiding our authentic selves for fear of being othered, for being excluded, for not feeling supported or feeling seen, or feeling like that those parts of us, really are important or have value. And so, for me, when I think about real culture, it's how can we move away from folks being fake and just performing. That is exhausting when we have to put more effort into, if we're saying things the right way, or if we are showing up like everyone else and not showing up like ourselves, like that does get in the way of us being able to put our best ideas forward, to be able to have disagreements, to be able to, call out things or people. And that's what is going to make companies more innovative, is if people do feel like they can be their real selves, their authentic selves. I also look at not just like the handbooks, like you can have the fancy handbook that no one, honestly, you may or may not read the handbook. Like maybe you need to take PTO, look at the PTO policy, or you need to check out something around your healthcare, your benefits. You might look at the handbook, but whatever is written in the handbook, whatever is on your website, whatever values you have, how does that show up in the day-to-day of the work? Like operationalizing values, making it really real. And so the opposite of a real culture is a fake culture. And we say all the time that we don't like fake people, right? We don't like weird people. Because you don't really know how to operate around fakeness. And I think that is what I also see when it comes to workplace cultures that also lack that authenticity and that transparency and that realness, is I don't know how to be myself here. So I'm just going to do what everybody else is doing. I'm going to kind of fall under the radar because I don't want to be called out for being different. I love Kendrick Lamar. He's one of my favorite artists. I just went to his concert in LA, like love him down, seen him a lot. And his big song, Not Like Us, right? Like They Not Like Us, right? And so it's funny because when I think about how that relates to this, we want people that are not like us. Like we don't want to work. I don't say we don't want to, because I don't want to project what other people might want or not want, but working in a homogenous workplace culture where everyone is the same, that company is not going to go far. That company is going to not retain their best people because everyone is scared to be themselves. So,
I mean, we see it all the time. Like I have been gaslit by so many corporations that I thought there was going to be one thing, and then I got there and it was like so different. And I've had to do that. Like, let me speak like everyone else corporate speak, because there's like no one like me here. Like, it's why I didn't think I would fit in HR for so long. Cause I was like, I had never met other HR people who were kind of like me. Everyone was like very by the book, like handbook HR. And I was like, what if we did everything differently? What if we redesigned Performative? Right. And it's weird. Like I honestly thrive better in situations where I'm able to like show up like myself, like you said. And it's so clear when a culture is not real, because it's like you feel like you're being gaslit every day. You're like, whoa. I'm like hearing one thing, or on the wall it says all of us trust each other. But then I get into a meeting and my manager is asking me 15 questions about how I did something and they don't trust me to get it done correctly. And I think that I feel like the values, when values like became really popular, it actually like increased in authenticity in some workplaces. Some workplaces did a good job and became like super authentic with their values. Other places I feel like just were like, I'm going to slap these 6 words on a wall and I'm going to say this is what we're doing and it's going to make me look good, but I'm actually not going to do any of these things.
Yeah, yeah. Do you watch Severance?
No, but every single person has told me to watch it. It is
You
on my
have to.
list. It's on my list. I've heard it. I would really like it. So no spoilers, please.
I won't say anything. I won't give it away. The only thing I will say is once you watch it, we have to come back and do a whole episode about it because Severance, the Ennies, they're operating in this very fake work environment and it's so detached from reality. And so like there's a character, gosh, her name is slipping my mind right now, red hair, she's amazing in the show, but I remember her first day working there. She was looking around like, what is happening? Because y'all are just very fake, very weird, and I don't like what's going on here. And I do see that happening. You know, yes, that was TV, but even in real life, when sometimes the recruiting process is so great because folks can talk a good game, right? Especially, you know, recruiters. I used to work in talent acquisition. We will sell you a dream, and then you get there, you're like, oh, this is not what I thought it was, you know, going to be. And so, you know, I see a lot of organizations putting in so much work in their employer brand, but like, what does that actually look like internally? Now that you've got the good talent, how are you going to keep them? How are you going to develop them and nurture them and really develop them so that they can feel comfortable saying, hey, I have this great new idea, or why don't we do this? Or what if we redesign this, right? That's how companies get better.
Of course. And I mean, we think a lot about like culture. Like, I don't think it's HR's job. I never say it's just HR's job. Like, I think it's everyone's job to like do, like really build a really good culture. But I think like our job is like the initiatives, the culture initiatives, like what is even happening at this company. You know, I love to talk about like wins and failures. How have you seen a company's like culture initiative just absolutely fall flat? Like just missed the mark completely. I am here for this. Tell me what went wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say, you know, at Perfecta, we are the thought partners. You know, we really work alongside our clients to help them think about, you know, strategies and initiatives and programs that align with the business needs and goals, what leadership, you know, kind of saying, okay, here's what leadership desires and needs, but here's what employees really want, and making sure that we're working in the middle. So a couple of things. I will say the biggest trend though is that companies oftentimes have such great initiatives, like great ideas. The what is very like clear, but there's not a lot of thought put into the how, like how are we going to do this? Or, well, why are we doing this, right?
Yeah.
For example, a couple of years ago, I was working with a company in, I'll just say the real estate industry.
Yep.
Really, really wonderful company. But the HR team, let me take a step back. When it comes to the work of inclusion and belonging and diversity equity, right? It's what I often tell folks is all of this work it is important. It's meaningful. And just because it is doesn't mean that we can do everything at one time, right? In this organization in particular, they wanted to launch ERGs, a mentorship program, an inclusive recruiting strategy, an internship program in like 6 months, right? So we had to say like, wait, slow down. Like, let's focus on where do you have the resources? Where do you have the capacity? And then how does this align to your business goals and objectives? And so one idea was, well, let's build an inclusive recruiting strategy. So I said, okay, great. Well, how many folks do you actually plan to hire this year, right? Like, what's your ideal recruiting goals and your, you know, ideal headcount? And they were like, oh, well, we only want to hire for 5 roles this year. And so, right. And so it's when, you know, we're thinking about launching a inclusive recruiting strategy, that essentially is going to be an overhaul of how you are recruiting. finding recruiting sources, and that takes, money for those partnerships and things like that. And it's, well, if you are only going to hire 5 folks, not to say that that's not a great idea, is there a more grassroots approach that we can take? Or if recruiting is not a big priority, is it retention? Is it leadership pipelining? So we kind of had to redirect. That's one. And then sometimes there's just a disconnect between intention and real life. And I don't want to say things that I'm sure other folks have said, but we'll talk about performative events around heritage days or months, right? So like Juneteenth or Black History Month, right? That's 1 month out of the year, the shortest month of the year. And then you have Juneteenth, which is 1 day. It's, hey, look, I'm Black 365 days of the year, right? And so to me, it's, sure, we can have the event, we can, which I love those events, but what are we doing on the other months? What are we doing the other days of the year? Are we looking at how employees of these groups are being treated? Are they being developed? Are they being recognized for their performance and not just their identities? Like, oh, we have, a Black person in leadership team. Let's, interview you and let's put you on our website and say, hey, happy Black History Month. But like, what does it look like to actually develop, our Black employees? And so what we saw, and I know, we all saw this in 2020, it's so many companies were saying, hey, Black Lives Matters, we support that movement. And then their Black employees were like, hold on now, because we have a list of demands, or, y'all aren't able to keep us here. We don't feel safe here. So what does this look like internally? So I think that's the biggest thing. Sometimes there's just a disconnect. And it could be some of the ideas around initiatives can be a bit short term and not really thinking about the longevity of it and just the long-term implications of it. I can go on and on and on, but
you brought up so many good points. Like that performative piece of culture just like does not land well when that's like not someone's reality, right? Like I remember when we did everything after 2020, I was at a company and we like did a lot of work around DEI, and where they were like, oh, here's what we're going to do. And we had an ERG that was all the people of color, which was like a fascinating ERG to be a part of, because I was like,
yes,
we have different I was like, we have different experiences. Like I'm brown. There are Black people in this group who have a very different experience of what's happening in the world than what I'm having. Like, and we're just one ERG that's like meant to meet all our needs. And that was like such an interesting time too, because I thought like the ERG was great, but then I was like, it feels really bad that like we're all in this one group lumped together, and like our experiences are so different, vastly different.
Yes.
And like they would come to us after the George Floyd stuff and be like, what do you all think? And I was like, what? I have nothing to say, but also like, you can't burden our Black employees who are living this reality by telling you like that whole time honestly felt like a fever dream. Like during the pandemic, watching like the murder of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and then dealing with how corporations responded to it. It felt like at its core, like performative at best, a lot of places.
Tell me about it. And I had several folks within, the Black and brown communities reaching out to me saying, hey, I know that your company does, trainings and development on inclusivity and belonging. And, can you support us? Or we don't know what to do, because we are now being tasked with, hey, you want us to get in front of our entire company and talk about our experiences as people of color, but this feels like a really heavy task that I personally don't want to do, right? It just feel like I shouldn't have to, but I'm being asked. So, I don't mind doing it, and I do it all on the regular, because this is the work that I do, right? Like I live, breathe, and I'm in this work daily. But that is a big ask. And, a conversation I have with leaders on a lot of their initiatives and ideas that they have is, are we putting a Band-Aid on an open heart surgery? Right? Like, are we really like solving for the thing? Or are we just trying to like, oops, here's a Band-Aid. Okay, we stop the bleeding for 10 seconds. And then what happens? You're not going to heal if that is the solution. So really try to get to the root of what companies are solving for when it comes to cultural transformation, to see, is it an initiative? Is it a policy? Is it scalable? Do we have accountability behind it? How do we make sure we're not doing things just to say that we're doing it?
Yeah. And I think on the note of trust, and I know Minda Harts has a book coming out about this on trust. I'm so excited in July.
I love Minda.
I know. I keep talking about this book. I'm like so excited. She's going to be on the podcast, I think, later this season.
Yes.
I love her. She's been on before. She does brilliant work. And she has a book coming out about trust. And I've been thinking about this a lot because when you do performative things in the workplace, it actually really damages the trust.
Makes it worse.
How do companies actually rebuild that? Let's say, they went the wrong route and decided to do something very performative, not even realizing. Sometimes you'd be shocked that people don't realize how performative their actions are until you say, hey, let me put a mirror right here. Do you realize that this is what's happening? How do you actually rebuild trust after that?
And I'm going to answer that too, but I love that you said mirror, right? Because when a culture is real, kind of going back to what, I was saying earlier, people can be real. And as leaders, I'm the CEO of my company, and I tell my team all the time, please be honest with me. I want you to be a mirror to me, because too many times, leaders go unchecked. Sometimes they just are in a privileged position that removes them from the day-to-day, and they think they're doing the right thing, but they're not. And some leaders just are problematic, right? When we talk about a loss of trust, I think there's also, I'll give an example. Let's say one person feels uncomfortable, they start talking about it and it spreads. Then there's this tension and this resentment, and even people who weren't directly impacted start looking at that leader differently. So how can companies rebuild trust? When I think about companies too, even though we talk about companies, companies are just made up of a bunch of people, right? So a bunch of humans that make mistakes, and we are human. And the first thing is, as a leader, is to acknowledge a problem, address the elephant in the room. Because even if you have, say your culture are your values and your employer brand statement and all of that, culture is really what's felt, what's communicated. And I think too many times leaders are afraid of being vulnerable because it can be perceived as weakness or just admitting that they were wrong. So first, acknowledging a problem, addressing the elephant in the room, what you're hearing, actually ask for feedback and ask for it regularly, and then take action. I think leaders who wait too long to speak just give more time for that distrust to build. And that's where that disengagement continues to grow. Sometimes it can be beyond repair, unfortunately. But it comes down to communication, vulnerability, feedback as well. And not making any assumptions. And one thing I will say too is, even as a leader, if you are at, or even HR, right? We're talking about HR, and you also have to look at what is HR's relationship with employees, right? That's why even at Perfecta, we come in and do focus groups and assessments for companies, because employees may not always feel the most comfortable giving that feedback to HR. And so just because someone is asking for feedback is saying, hey, please be honest with me. You can trust me. It may take time for that trust to actually be built. And you may have to give a little bit. Maybe you offer up a little vulnerability first to see if you get that in return.
My favorite thing is when managers just assume that hiring globally is simple. It's giving Elle Woods what? It's hard? Nah, it's a bit more complicated than most people realize. There's compliance, payroll rules, and local benefits to consider. Luckily, Oyster HR has your back. They handle all the global employment technicalities in over 180 countries, so you don't have to know everything, because that would be impossible. Now you can hire anywhere, stay compliant, and pay teams seamlessly. Go to oysterhr.com and make your next international hire the easiest thing you've done. Is it just me, or does multi-state HR compliance feel impossible to keep up with? 650 is here to help. With 650, you can generate handbooks, hiring paperwork, separation agreements, and more that's compliant in all 50 states. As laws change, your documents update automatically. Consider it your secret weapon for staying compliant without losing your mind. And with 650 AI, you can ask employment law questions in your own words and get quick, reliable answers without all the legalese. No more hunting down state law information, no more outdated policies, just peace of mind. Visit 650, SIXFIFTY.com to see why HR teams love 650. That's 650.com. Yeah, you mentioned so many great methods of like rebuilding trust. And a really big one that I think about a lot is like communication, because I like don't think anyone is a great communicator naturally. I think it all takes like time and effort. And when you're communicating at the company level, I think that can like shape a lot of what's happening. Like, talk to me about communication. Like, what role do you think comms play in like actually setting the tone and shaping cultural narratives at a company?
Mm. Communications, it's hard. I mean, look, I am someone who I've really had to work on my communication skills as a CEO, right? I'm the only child.
Ooh,
So
red flag.
I
Just kidding.
know.
Kidding.
And I'm a Capricorn.
Oh, double red
So
flag. Oh God, just kidding.
I know. And so, hey, we can be like very direct. It can
Direct.
be a little cutting. It could be, but we're also super sweet. It's like, I didn't mean to say it like that. It
came
was
out.
a lot sweeter. It just came out that way. Like, anyways, so comms, there's also a strategy to comms, not in a fake way or performative way, but also in a strategic way. Right. So even we're working with companies on rolling out initiatives and programs, we're like, okay, you have an employee engagement strategy. Where is a comm strategy to complement that? Because you oftentimes have to repeat things. I think they say, I'm not a marketer per se, but a lot of marketing goes into this work.
Yeah.
Because marketing, you kind of have to repeat things, maybe 7 or 8 times for folks to actually get it or pay attention.
Yep.
I see that with internal comms, it does tell employees like what's being prioritized, what's being celebrated, what is safe to say or do, especially now. And I was just in a conversation with a healthcare company, earlier today around just some changes that they're making. And, administration, not even just them, a lot of our clients that we work with, and they are trying to work through what is okay to say and what is okay to not say, or is our company still committed to inclusion, right? And so we don't ever want to assume that employees know, because we will run with our own assumptions, but in comms, how can we connect the dots between the values and the actual employee experience? And so I think it trickles down, right? You have town hall announcements, maybe some updates from the CEO, but it's also around how are people responding and engaging in Slack and via email? What is the tone? How are managers, and we don't talk enough about training managers and upskilling managers. So many folks get promoted into a manager role because they're good at their job, but that doesn't mean they're good at managing or leading people. So how are we actually giving our managers the tools to communicate? Because they have the first, line of access to employees. How are they communicating with, employees? And the one last thing I'll say too is around restructuring and layoffs. When we actually put out a lot of content around this when companies were going through restructuring and layoffs, how do you do that thoughtfully? Not even from a change management perspective.
Yeah.
And so I think that also tells employees everything that they need to know about culture is how do we communicate when things are tough, or do we just go silent and let people run with their own stories?
Going silent is a terrible idea. I think it's interesting because I've had to toe this line so often. How do you balance the inspiring, everything's going great here, with the like, can we actually be honest about the challenges we're facing? Like, how do you find that
Yes.
balance? Because I think like we want the whole episode's about real cultures. Like you have to be real about the challenges you're facing, but where do you see that balance and like how do you actually balance that then?
Mm. You know, that is such a good question. Such a good question. Because, you know, I think about even my experience as a leader, you know, we've had to go through some restructuring and team changes and also working through what, you know, how are we going to continue to do the work that we do given the administration. So it's perfectly okay to say, look, this is really freaking hard. Right. But we're going to get through it. And this is how we're committed and take employees along the journey, like giving that reassurance, also being honest about the reality, and, you know, finding ways for leaders to just be present. Some of our clients, their CEOs have like office hours.
Love that.
Where, yeah, you said that you do too?
Our CEO used to do cold brews with Adam, where like every few weeks he would get a group of a few people together and do a cold brew with them. Because I didn't want to make it about drinking. So it became like cold brews or coffee with Adam, but now
like coffee.
Yeah. So he does that. And we haven't done them in a bit, mostly because we had like a company retreat, but we'll probably restart them soon.
Yes.
And he loved them. They were like the joy of his week. I've never seen this man so happy.
So what do y'all call it now? Is it still called cold brews? Or?
Cold brews with Adam, yeah. We just haven't scheduled them yet. Yeah. I thought it was great because like sometimes people don't want to go to HR and tell on anyone, right? Sometimes people just like, he's the CEO of the company. Like people should feel comfortable saying things to him. And I thought cold brews were like an excellent chance to like remove me out of it. Like if you don't want HR there, so he can actually say something.
I love that. Yeah, office hours is great. It does take time, I think, for you know, employees to get comfortable with asking questions or speak. It depends on the person, right? I've seen for some of our clients where their employees are like, so let's get straight to it. What do you think about women's rights? Or like, what do you think about women's reproduction rights? Like, what are you doing for us? Like, or then you have some employees that are kind of tiptoe around, or they might come and like be a silent observer. And then the next time they might bring a friend and then they might speak the third time, right? So that, just being available to answer questions, you know, having a Q&A. I see too sometimes where, you know, they'll have their very rehearsed talking points.
Yeah.
But, you know, allowing employees to ask questions. And, you know, there might be some times where they may not be able to answer it. Like it might be best coming from HR. But, you know, just making sure that there's not so much of a disconnect or detachment from, you know, the leaders at the top and, you know, frontline employees or, you know, folks that are really connected closely to users or customers, folks in the community, but there is that feedback loop. So going back to your question, it's balancing the reality, like with the reassurance, you know. Yeah. I often see that too as a leader, like operating, I think you have to operate with the level of unapologetic optimism as a leader.
Yep.
And business ebbs and flows. I could say that for my business, but even for Fortune 500, you know, businesses ebbs and flows, they pivot, they change. And so even if a leader can speak to like, we've been through this before and we'll get through this again, I think that gives folks a lot of reassurance, but also communicating the goals, communicating the actions and updates on that, because employees are going to want to hear updates.
Yeah. Good or bad. Absolutely. Like, I think everyone can see through the fake corporate comms. Like, we are not in fake corporate comm era times. We are in just tell us the truth times, I think, for a lot of employees. Mm-hmm. And that can really make a culture a real one versus a fake one. And I think another big role, and you've been touching on this a lot as the CEO of your company and a leader at your company, but a really big part of building a real work culture is having leaders who actually do the things they say they're going to do.
Yes.
And I think about this so often, like you're a leader in your company, you have other leaders who report to you. How do you hold leaders accountable when like the culture message starts to become like this fake PR spin and they're actually behaving like very differently? What do you do?
Holding leadership accountable, it's tying the actions back to the words. Like tying the actions back to the words. And that's a big one because we do work with a lot of leadership teams. Like sometimes we'll come into a company and we think that it's, talent retention is an issue because employees aren't being developed. We need to launch a mentorship program, but then we get in, it's like, wait, your leadership team is not aligned. Or the culture of the dynamic of that leadership team itself is not a reflection of how they desire the rest of the culture to operate.
Yeah.
And I've seen this done a lot of different ways when it comes to accountability for leaders, because who is holding them accountable, right? Maybe their board. If the board actually is holding themselves accountable as the board, which is a conversation for another day.
Yep.
I see a lot of value in the leadership teams holding each other accountable. So we've actually been working with leadership teams a lot lately to establish leadership norms, accountability statements for each other and for the team itself, where they can be mirrors, to one another. Because it might be very uncomfortable for a direct report to actually call out their leader. Yeah. But we also do encourage leaders to share with their teams, how they're going to show up in action and, make sure that they are asking for that feedback if they are not showing up in alignment, with how they say they are going to. But I think that that's a big challenge that a lot of even the companies that we work with are working through. Yeah. And sometimes leaders don't see it because, like I said, sometimes they kind of live and work in a bubble. So until they actually get that data, qualitative data, quantitative data on the employee experience around perceptions of leadership or around that trust level with leadership, it can be pretty eye-opening for them. And then they actually are like, oh, we have to change this. Leaders love a metric, as I know you know.
Oh my God.
They love a metric. So
everyone's obsessed with their KPIs. Yes. I'm like, can you all chill out?
Yes. So tie it to a KPI, tie it to a performance review, tie it in there some way. Yeah. So systematically, I think that's the word I'm looking for. Yep. It can be tied to something. The other thing I'll say too, I feel like I'm rambling. This last thing I'll say is, what does it look like to model leadership up, down, and across the organization, right? Like no matter if you have a team or not, how can everyone role model leadership and how can we tie a leadership value into performance reviews? I think that's something that I really want to explore with our clients this year.
Oh, I love that. You said something while you were talking and first of all, you said so much good stuff. My brain was just spiraling because I was like, when you talked about the leader profile or leadership norms, I was like, that's such a good thing that you could just document in your company and be like, here's what leaders look like at our company and here's how they behave. Yes. And then when your leaders aren't being accountable, you show up and you're like, hey, I'm holding you accountable here. We don't yell at each other in meetings. We don't blame each other for things that we're missing. We actively move our deadlines when we need to move them. Here's what we want great leaders to be here. And I did an episode on this earlier this season. Everyone technically is a leader at the company. Yes, there are executives, but there are managers who are leaders. There are individual contributors who lead work. And I think when you start talking about leadership as all of you have the capacity to be leaders here, then it kind of changes the conversation where it's less like your leaders are selling you fake bullshit and more like they're being real with you about what's going on here and how you show up as a leader.
Yeah. And while you just brought that up, I do want to shout out Zapier, which was a company I worked with from 2020 to 2022, maybe 23. And I coached a few of their leaders. And one thing I loved about what they did is they talked about their values day in and day out. And they talk about operationalizing your values, which I clearly feel strongly about. And they would shout out employees that were operating in one of their values, like in Slack on a regular. Or when it came to giving someone feedback about performance, they would tie it to a value instead of saying like, hey, you did this thing and it wasn't okay. It was like, hey, this happened and this doesn't align with our value of this, and just kind of want to talk through that with you. And so, even at Perfecta, our values are teach, trust, excellence, authenticity. How do you spell teach? Collaboration and heart. And so like the T is trust. And so sometimes say someone misses a deadline or they say they're going to do something that they didn't do, right? We bring in that value of trust. Like in the value of trust, we trusted that you would do the thing that you said you were going to do, and that didn't happen, right? And so like I always like to bring in our values as well. I think they do a really good job of it.
I love that. That's such a good point. I want to play like a brief and fun game. It's going to be called corporate red flag or green flag. And I'm basically going to read you something and you tell me if it's a red flag, green flag, no discussion. I just want to know what you think. Ready? Okay.
So just say red flag, green flag.
Yeah.
Don't add a response.
Maybe you can add a response if you want, I guess. I wish I had like game show music because like this is where game show music would play. It would be like boop, 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 boop. Okay, I need to stop doing weird things on this podcast. I need to stop doing weird things on this podcast. Okay, red flag, green flag. We're like a family here.
Red flag.
I never want to hear someone say that. The CEO says people are our greatest asset, but they've never met the customer support team.
Red flag.
A company values page has a list of 12 core values.
A red flag.
I can't even remember 4. 12 would be crazy to me.
Look, the only reason why I can't remember ours is because it's an acronym.
I love that. 5 is perfect. Honestly, I think like 4 to 6 is the ideal amount of core values. Anything past that, no one's remembering it. No. Leaders say we're transparent, but big changes happen with zero explanation.
Red flag.
The company announces a new value after a PR scandal.
Red flag.
A culture committee has no budget or decision-making power.
Red, fire. Yeah, it's just no.
I said on a panel once, if you have ERGs and you don't give them budget, why do you have ERGs then? Like,
what are they there for? What are they doing?
If you don't compensate their leaders, also, what are you doing? Okay, sorry, moving on. Leadership admits they missed the mark and share how they'll improve.
Leadership says they missed the mark and they share how they'll improve. Okay, I think that's a green flag.
Yeah, I had to put one in there, Every department, that's a great flag. Every department has its own subculture, but they all align to the same shared values.
I want to know your thoughts. I'm going to say green flag.
It is a green flag. Yeah. I think every department should have its own subculture. And as long as all of you are not creating like little toxic department cultures, then that's very fair. Every team operates differently, but it's like in the grand scheme of things, if we're all aligned to here's how we should all operate and how we do it individually in our teams is different, totally okay. That was fun.
Yes.
Now, if I had music, it would play here and go boop, boop, boop. Some of the red flags I think are like, people are probably listening and they're like, oh shit, that's happening at my org right now. Because I've seen company values pages that are far too long in words that I'm like, I cannot keep this in my memory. Like I do not need 12 core values. But thank you for playing my fun game with me. Every episode I try to play a fun game. I don't usually get to it, but this one was really fun.
Yay.
You've given me like so much to think about when it comes to like building real, authentic cultures, from how we talk to each other to like what leaders are doing to behaviors to values. Like so much good food for thought in this episode. And I want to wrap up with like 2 of my favorite questions to ask. I usually like to ask like a future question and an advice question. So I'll ask my advice question first. If you could redesign culture building from scratch, meaning like everything we do to build cultures at companies, what would you prioritize in your first year?
I'm going to put on a hat of like a chief culture officer. And if I was coming into a company, I like that too. I think that would be cool and fun. But the first thing I would do is talk to as many employees as possible and understand their goals, their career goals, their life goals, why they joined the company, look at the company's goals, and just really tie employee goals to company goals. Make sure that employees see the impact of their work.
Yeah.
They understand the meaning behind it. And that's from anyone from like VP of strategy and customer success to the executive assistant. Because too many times employees are disengaged because they're demotivated, because they don't feel value, because they don't recognize the value of their work. So I want to give meaning to everyone give meaning to everyone on their work and their impact and their value. And then kind of going back to the whole leadership thing, I feel very strongly about that too, is making sure that everyone can embody a leader, whether it's in title or not. Because something that's very important to me is redesigning the system to where employees recognize that they have just as much power as their employers, and we can't work without one or the other, right? Like leaders and employers can't work if their employees aren't working, well, or aren't performing well. And then, same for employees and leaders. So how do we redesign that power dynamic so it's a bit more fair and everyone understands their impact and can work together? And everyone is a leader and they understand what that looks like from day one.
Yeah.
And I think leadership looks differently for so many people, right? Like some folks don't want to lead a team.
No.
They don't want to get promoted. Honestly, they're like, I just want to do my work and that's it. But like, are there different ways they can grow cross-functionally, with their scope, or even be more strategic minded? Leadership looks so many different ways. I think the old way was, all right, you do this for 2 years, you move up. You do this for another 3 years, you move up again. So what does it look like for everyone to feel like they can be a leader from day one?
Yeah, you're really touching on like meaning at work. And I genuinely think you can build real cultures if you tell people like what their meaning is at work. Like, what is your mission? What is your vision? What is your goals? I loved that you brought up goals. That's honestly like not something I even thought about when I wrote this question. And you brought it up and I was like, you know what? Like people want meaning from their work now more than ever. And if you can help them see what their work contributes to, it's going to build a better and more engaged culture. So I love that answer. And now
and
I gotta go
also right. I led a retreat for one of our clients in DC in January, and I did a session called Impact Players. It's based on a book called Impact Players, but it's like around high performance because they're very much so focused on building a high performing culture this year. And we talked about how everyone can identify what their value is. And there was one person who is just phenomenal, and she works on like the admin, kind of like project management, operational side. And when she really sat and, talked about it, we did a share out at the end, and she said, I never recognized like how valuable my work is. This is a nonprofit. They're fighting to end prostate cancer. And she's like, I see that, other folks who are more in the community, they're advocating, they're on, they're at the White House, they're advocating for, cancer research and things like that. Like I can see the meaning of their work, but for me, I didn't realize that there was like actual, like real meaning in my work, but I'm helping this machine run so that they can go out there and advocate, and so it was great to be able to have that training because it just kind of opened up her eyes to the value. And I just think it's important for everyone to know that their work is meaningful. That's why they're there.
I love that. And my final question this episode, I always love to do a future. What do you think the next generation of employees, God help me, will expect from real workplace culture?
You know what, Heba? There's a lot of things right now that are being marketed and positioned as perks.
Yep.
They really are going to have to become the standard. Like flexibility. Flexibility is going to have to be a standard and not just a perk. more focus on psychological or emotional safety. I would say more proof around values as well too.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, shout out to Gen Z, right? And
yes,
what's the generation after Gen Z? I think they might kind of be starting to work, or
no, Gen Alpha, I think Gen Z will be like 30% of the workforce by 2030 or something. I can't remember. The majority of the workforce, I can't remember. I'm going to be put out to pasture hopefully by then.
Right.
I'm kidding. I'll be doing this job till all my hairs are white, not just the front half. Gen Alpha, because my nephews are Gen Alpha and they terrify me.
Oh,
well, that's because
how
they
old
know
are they?
They're like a lot. He's 10. Oh my God. We just asked him this past weekend.
Okay.
8. I'm such a bad aunt. 8 and 12, 11. Shit. I don't know. I can't remember.
Yeah.
My sister
So
and I
it's
were
like,
both
hey,
thinking, yeah.
In the next 5 to 10 years, I mean, companies going to have to catch up very quickly. I think, we've seen with every generation, there's new nuances and things that, each generation needs a little bit differently to do their work well. And I think that, some of the things that are like a value add from a culture perspective is going to have to be a must.
They must.
And so I'm looking forward to seeing how it shifts and how leaders start to prepare now. But that's what I would say. So flexibility, emotional, psychological safety, and just putting more action behind your words, because you will get called out.
Oh yeah, you'll get canceled real fast. That's just not great. I think we will like genuinely shed this idea of like professionalism. I'm hoping we will, because we've like seen that word is like rooted in like not great places, like basically used to police people in the workplace that don't look a certain way, essentially. So I'm like hopeful the next generation really lets go and like redefines what is professionalism in the workplace and actually takes back that definition and just makes it mean something. Like I don't want it to just mean that you have to like look a certain way and have a certain body and you have to act a certain way. I want the definition to evolve so much more. Maybe we even get rid of that word completely. I don't know.
Oof. I have my own, same with you. I have some strong feelings towards that word. And even I kind of cringe now. I taught at a university, North Carolina A&T, go Aggies, with the business school. And, we would teach like etiquette classes and some of the things I'm like, I wish we didn't teach that, because I mean, even me, right? And I'm sure you, like, we learn and we change and we unlearn things, right? We are all socialized and educated a certain way. And then we kind of have to shed some of that to be more, inclusive in how we show up. And look, I mean, I used to teach like dress etiquette classes. It was very like gender focused. And I look back, I'm like, I wish I never, nobody ever sees that. Like, girls, women, you must wear a skirt or those things. So I feel you on the professionalism
We're
front.
changing our mind all the time. I did a keynote in New York last month, and this month, oh my God, I forgot what month we were in. It was this month. Somebody asked a question about dress code. How do we get our younger employees to abide by the dress code? How do we talk about that? And I was like, wow, I haven't talked about a dress code in like such a long time, but we're changing the boundaries of how we show up. And that maybe that means then our workplace cultures will change. Anyways, I am so honored you spent time with me today, just digging into this topic about real work cultures. You've like done so much work around this, have so many stories to share. So I just want to say thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thank you for having me.
And for people who want to get in touch with you, I always link your LinkedIn on the show notes, but any other way for people to get in touch with you?
I would say LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I love me some LinkedIn, honestly. So you can find me on LinkedIn, right? Instagram, Twitter, I'm there, but find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. Keep up with all the latest HR resources by subscribing on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen. And if you love I Hate It Here, tell an HR friend. I'll see you next time.